Check-o, check-o! Born to roll!
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Born to Roam. This week, I have the pride and the privilege of welcoming Mr. Thomas O'Keefe. How are you doing?
Great. How are you doing? It's supposed to snow down here in Nashville this weekend. That's going to be exciting.
How common of an occurrence is that?
Very uncommon. Yeah. If it snows this much, the kids are out of school, and it's like the end of the world. It's like rioting, and grocery stores are emptied of milk and bread, and it's a mess. Everyone's drives their SUV and thinks they can drive in the snow, and they wreck.
Yeah. Just a lot of overcompensation.
That's right, 100%. So hopefully I will avoid some of that.
Well, I wish you good luck in that. We're very, very cold up here. Yes, it's an extremely Arctic day up here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. So it seems like you'll experience a little bit of our flavor, but hopefully not too much.
No, I've been there a million times, but I always drive through there on my way to Toronto.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you go just from Buffalo then, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or from Toronto to Detroit, which is the one you don't want to do, because when you leave Toronto and drive across Windsor towards Detroit, when you cross into the U.S. at the Ambassador Bridge in U.S., that is the place where the U.S. trains all their customs people for the entire Canadian border from ocean to ocean. So if you when you come into the U.S. on the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, that's where you really get it.
That makes a lot of sense, and that has never. I always wondered why it was so stiff at that border crossing there. It always seems to be
because they're all trainees and they're all by the book.
Yes,
I've spent many hours there.
Yes, and it seems like the friendlier border people at the Buffalo crossing seem to be like the people that are, they're in the autumn of their border career. They're just they're ready to, they've seen it all. They're not. Right. I'm not saying they're slacking off, but they're not.
No. They're just, they know what's important and what's not important.
They're not trying to impress any superiors.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of times, our bus drivers will take us. If you were headed towards Detroit, they'll veer to the north, and there's a crossing that's about 20 miles north of Detroit, and they'll actually take that one to go out of the way to avoid the Ambassador Bridge. A little knowledge. if you're not on tour, you don't
a little
think about
pro
this
tip.
stuff.
So that seems like a very good way to segue into your introduction. So, Mr. Thomas O'Keefe, world famous tour manager for several massive bands and artists over the years, as well as a professional musician yourself. What should we just go down the list of just kind of a brief list of some of the credits of people that you worked with?
Yeah, if you want, that's probably the simplest way to do it. I played in a punk rock band for many, many years called ANTiSEEN from Charlotte, North Carolina. And that probably took me from the 80s into the mid 90s, into the mid to later 90s. ANTiSEEN was one of those bands that was a grunge rock band that didn't get to be famous. You know what I mean? Like when Nirvana got famous and these other bands got famous, ANTiSEEN didn't, which is fine. It all worked out okay. But Kurt Cobain was an ANTiSEEN fan. That's pretty awesome for me to be able to say that. Yeah.
Wow.
But that doesn't pay the bills or anything, being able to say that. So I retired from that band in 96. I started tour managing, and I worked for several different bands that you never heard of. And then I tour managed a band called D-Generation. They were from New York City. Great band. You would, if you're unaware of them, you would, given how your band sounds, you would love them.
I'm writing it down right now.
And then I tour managed Ryan Adams' first band, Whiskeytown, from 97 to 2000. I ended up writing a book about it called Waiting to Derail. This is the book about that. And then after that, I worked with Train for 13 years, which was, when I started with them, we were playing smaller places, and I went all the way up to arenas and sheds with them. And then I worked at a management company for a bit here in Nashville. I worked with Sia. I worked with Third Eye Blind. And then the last 5.5 years have been with Weezer.
Wow.
So that has so I've done a lot of stuff. I mean, and I'm happy. I will likely end my career, I'll probably work with Weezer for 7 or 8 more years before I get too old to do it.
Wow. Well, I mean, that is an incredible list of artists that you worked with and an incredible resume. But I'd like to just circle back to the first thing that you mentioned there, working with or playing with ANTiSEEN. So ANTiSEEN, can you elaborate a little bit on ANTiSEEN's affiliation with GG Allin?
Yeah. Somehow we became friends with him. I don't really understand. I don't recall exactly when it happened. And there was a weird period of time. GG Allin was obviously a crazy person and a often misunderstood person. I would say because he's obviously most famous for his shows where he destroyed everything and made a mess and did all kinds of shenanigans on stage. But that unfortunately, the people didn't he never got the credit for being a great songwriter that I thought he was, which sounds insane, I know, but he was really good at that. He really understood rock and roll. He really understood songwriting, recording. And, there are albums of his and songs of his that, although the lyrics can be insanely offensive and really it's meant to be a joke. He's not being really serious about that. But he lived a fucked up life, and he, there were times where he was completely normal. There was times where he was out of his mind. There are times where he, so this is, there's one thing about punk rock dudes that I never understood. And that is a lot of them always have this fascination with like serial killers and crap like that. Why would you want to, I have zero interest in that stuff, right? So Gigi writes a letter to John Hinckley. John Hinckley is the guy who shot Ronald Reagan in the early 80s, right? So Gigi writes him a letter in prison and says, hey, man, that was really cool what you did. Maybe if you get out, we'll try again someday. Which, of course, the fucking Secret Service is reading this guy's mail, and Gigi is in Boston one day, and the black van pulls up, and they throw him in the black van, and the Secret Service interrogates him for like 4 hours, this was back when Bush #1 old man Bush was president in the early 90s. And they interrogated Gigi for a couple hours, and they said, what would you do if George Bush were sitting right here? And Gigi's like, I don't know. I'd buy him a beer. What the fuck? So the Secret Service finally let him go, and they said, we realize you're not a threat. You're just a fucking idiot for writing that letter. Yeah. So, but he ended up having to go to jail for some girlfriend thing, and he ended up being in jail for a while. But we recorded an album with him, and at the time, me and Jeff, the singer of my band, we worked at a X-ray machine company south of Charlotte, North Carolina. And we worked with a bunch of hillbilly redneck types. They all knew who GG Allin was from us, because we had talked about him. And we actually brought Gigi to the company Christmas party one year, which was pretty amazing. I can't believe we didn't get fired. But Gigi was a handful. And then he eventually, he died of a heroin overdose. So obviously heroin doesn't come with instructions. And he had a lot of money on him because he had just gotten a small record advance from some label in Europe. So he had like 20 grand in his pocket, and he ended up overdosing, which was a shame. But he, here we are talking about him 25 years later. And that's honestly what he cared most about, being remembered for being this lunatic. So he got his wish.
He did get his wish, I guess is very much so true. So I guess this whole John Hinckley letter thing, would this have happened around the Todd Phillips movie Hated, when he was making that movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure when he filmed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably probably in the early, GG's heyday, so to speak, was probably the very late 80s into the early 90s. So I imagine that was when it was. I mean, keep in mind, he would do a tour. He would book a tour of, say, 15 shows, and he would cancel 6 or 7 of them. You know, he would do a show one night, and then he would overdo it, and then the next day he would feel like shit, or he'd be beat up, or got arrested, or something if he had 20 shows in a row, like me or you would have 20 shows, and we would go play 20 shows, right? He would have 20 shows, he'd go play 11 of them. Sometimes if he felt like shit the next day, he'd go, fuck it, cancel the show. So and that, in a way, the fact that he would book a show and then cancel it, and then the kids would go and it was canceled, it almost raised his mystique even more.
Yeah.
You know? But he was definitely, none of that stuff was an act. It was real. And he came from a super fucked up childhood. And I guess if you tie that into what he did, it kind of almost makes sense in some very weird, messed up way, you know? But I just hate the fact. The only thing, I'm not condoning everything he ever did, and I certainly wouldn't condone a lot of his subject matter in his songs, but he was more talented than people gave him credit for when it came to being a musician and putting songs together. So I would say that.
Yeah, well, it seems like, I mean, I guess when you create such a larger-than-life edifice of presentation the way he does, there's no way that it's not going to eclipse your actual creative output and your actual body
because
of work.
He's famous for that. I mean, I've seen him play quite a few. I saw him several times live, and it was frightening, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, his shows were like watching like a 15-minute long car wreck, you know, it's like,
yeah,
you know, the whole time you're watching it, you're like, oh, you know, it wasn't like, all right, everybody, how you doing tonight?
No.
It wasn't that, you know.
It's about the most confrontational show I could probably name, or at least, I mean, never having seen
nothing,
him. But.
Nothing is even, anything is such a distant second that it doesn't even count.
Yeah. So now, did you mention that you had experience with him in the recording studio, that kind of environment?
Yeah, we recorded, my band, we recorded an album with him, and that's where I came to that determination, because what happened was we recorded about 10 songs with no lyrics. We just put the songs together, and they were like verse, chorus kind of songs. And then he listened to them while he was in prison, and when he got out, he was in prison for like 8 or 10 months or something. And when he got out, we went to the studio, and he's like, this is song number 1. Because none of the songs had names, you know, we just recorded them, and we just knew them by what number they were on the tape. And he said, this is song number 1. It's called blah, blah, blah. I'm going to sing this. You sing this. You sing this. And he had it all together in his mind. So you can't, you know, I remember leaving the recording studio that day impressed that he had figured it all out and he knew exactly what he wanted it to be.
He mapped it all out. He had done. I mean,
of course, when you're, you know, if I locked you in prison for 8 months and you had nothing else to do, it would be pretty easy. Yeah. You know, your girlfriend's not calling you, and you're not, you know, shoveling snow in the driveway that day. So,
you're not figuring out what to cook for dinner that night or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. It's whatever they give you. I'm not suggesting you try it, but yeah, he definitely had some time to figure it all out.
And so you say that in the kind of recording environment, he was an extremely focused individual that was probably...
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I mean, I think that he was definitely an erratic person from obviously, you know, if some psychiatrist could probably give you a better, you know, definition of what's wrong with him. But he really, what he cared most about was he wanted to be you heard the stories about Alice Cooper when you were a kid, and you heard the stories about, you heard the stories about Ozzy, that 99% of them he never really did. And then Gigi wanted to be the guy who really did what he said he was going to do, you know?
Yeah.
And he definitely did that, because if you saw him one time, you left remembering it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, there was there's no substitutions for GG Allin, that's for sure. He is
No.
he is a true
Nope.
original. And it seems like he it's very interesting to hear your perspective that he was very cognizant of the fact that he was basically establishing a legacy while he was living, and that was one of his central aims, would you say, or what?
Well, I think that's not he's not the only person I have seen do that. I would say, in his own way, I would say precisely the same thing about Ryan Adams. Ryan Adams in his early infancy was building and creating this character that you know him to be. And it was a very methodical, intentional thing. He was well aware of if he did this, it would have this reaction. And if he did this, it would have this reaction. And he created this person, this character that is him. Now, I would say, if you hung out with him, that character is him, but it was definitely pre-planned and thought out and put together. It wasn't an accident.
Yes.
So I would say, in his own way, obviously what Gigi did and what Ryan did have no similarities other than they're essentially both rooted in punk rock. But other than that, they are two different things, but the same forward thinking went into both of them.
Yes, the same consciousness of the conscious presentation of whatever they're doing, and
precisely.
And it's
Ryan knew what he was building this thing and this image and this thing that would become what it became.
It's an interesting thing that way, because it seems like you'd be hard pressed to think of two people that seem on the surface so different in their presentation between GG Allin and Ryan Adams. But to me, the thing that unites us all, regardless of where we kind of fall on the spectrum of our intensity, is a kind of appreciation and reverence for rock and roll history, and understanding how this mythology gets laid down, and wanting to be a part of that.
Well, I mean, I think that's super important. I remember one time I was on tour somewhere in the early 2000s, and the singer of Train asked me. He said, "Man, why do you know so much about rock music history? Why do you care about that?" And I said, because anything that happens to there's nothing that's going to happen to you that hasn't already happened to Mick Jagger. So if I know what Mick Jagger did, I can tell you what to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not the first singer that ever, quit a band and put out a solo record or whatever. I mean, this happens all the time. So if you study this stuff and okay, Mick Jagger did this, Pete Townsend did this, but it was a mistake. Maybe I'll do this. There's definitely a roadmap, and you could certainly learn. There's a tremendous mountain of mistakes that bands made, especially business-wise in the 70s and early 80s, that you can, as an artist, can learn from. So of course, how would you... there's two reasons to study it. Because that's where you come from as a musician. We're all just the pieces of the puzzle that we came from. You know what I mean? I'm 57 years old. I was born in 1964. When I was 14, it was 1978. Do you think I'm a Kiss fan? Of course I fucking am. I'm the pristine age of a Kiss fan.
Yeah.
I fucking love Kiss. I still do. I love Cheap Trick. I love all those bands from that period, because that's what I was listening to when I was 14 years old. Because I'm the perfect age of somebody that likes that kind of music. And so inevitably we're all made up from that stuff. But we should also, as people who actually are in this business for real, you got to pay attention to what other people did to make sure you're not making the same mistake that Mick Jagger made.
Yes, and there are some well-treaded highways of mistakes throughout the history pages.
Right, the
of rock
road
and
to
roll.
hell is paved.
Yeah,
with many mistakes.
paved with solo albums.
Solo album. Yeah, you better believe it. That's a good quote.
So I just wanted to circle back on the whole on your origins in rock and roll, and that's a very good point about the place and time that you're born and how you get indoctrinated into the whole tapestry of rock and roll. So you were born in 1964, you said, and
right.
you're from North Carolina, correct?
No, I grew up in Connecticut, but I moved to North Carolina as a teenager.
Gotcha. And what was your first introduction to rock and roll through the bands of the 70s at the time? Like, was it Cheap Trick?
I think so. I mean, I still, somewhere on a wall somewhere in my office here, I still have my very first album that I liked, that I had, that was like mine, and it was Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles. And I remember thinking when I was maybe I was in kindergarten or first grade, probably first grade, I remember realizing that the long-haired Beatle albums were better than the short-haired Beatle albums.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew that. I made a conscious decision.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, and I listened to a lot of rock music my parents listened to, but I mean, I got my first record was Kiss Destroyer.
Nice.
And then it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
But, and I didn't start going to concerts. The first concert I went to was in 1978. I saw Boston with Sammy Hagar opening. And I'm lucky, that's the thing where people that, again, younger than me didn't see things I saw. People that were a year and a half older than me, like a guy a year and a half older than me probably saw Led Zeppelin. I didn't.
Yeah.
But someone before me. So I didn't see Queen, which really bums me out. But I saw Kiss in the heyday. I saw Van Halen 4 times in the heyday. Wow. I saw Ozzy with Randy Rhoads. I mean, there's quite a few of those. I saw Journey on Escape in 1981. So, I mean, I got to see a lot of stuff, but I was just but then I also made mistakes. I never saw Prince. I never saw Bowie. I missed seeing Queen the one time I could have gone, and I didn't do it. So you always make mistakes like that because you always think, I'll see him next year. And there's, sometimes there's not a next year,
Yeah. Sometimes
but I always believe it's definitely, like, my wife is 8 years younger than me. And when she was little, she was afraid of Kiss, because she'd see their posters in the roller skating rink and, what's that? I loved them and still do. So I always hate it when dudes my age go, yeah, I used to like Kiss, and then I grew up. I started listening to Wilco. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, fuck off.
I don't want to hear that crap.
Kiss rules.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Kiss is way better than Wilco. I feel like we just lost like a third of the people saying that.
If that's what we're going to lose people on, then I would rather just lose those people.
Amen.
Because if that's not just a fact, then I don't know what is.
Right. Yeah. That's simple. So yeah, I always think it all depends on where you grow up. If you're in if you're in a place where, it's easy to go to concerts, and also your age is very, like I met dudes standing in line at the concert when I was a kid that saw Led Zeppelin and saw Queen and saw those kind of bands that I was just a little bit too young. I missed out on.
Do you have a best kind of show of your early teens, your teenage years that kind of rise above them all?
There's so many, it's impossible to pick one. I always remember the first time I saw Kiss. I remember sitting in there and I was struggling with the realization that I was in the same building that they were in. I couldn't believe that I was about to see them, and they were amazing, I thought. But, there's so many that I saw that were great. It would be impossible to pick my best 10. Now, my band ANTiSEEN opened for Cheap Trick once, which was fucking amazing. Wow. So that might be one of my favorite concerts. And then I also managed this band called Watershed from Columbus, Ohio. And we opened I told them, I said, I'm going to get you guys an opening slot with Cheap Trick, but I have to play rhythm guitar. And they were like, okay, good. Because I'd done it before. So actually, we opened for them maybe about 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty great.
That's
like moments
awesome.
like that are pretty amazing.
No, nothing beats it. Getting to open.
Nothing beats it. Like my favorite part of writing this book was that Bunny Carlos wrote me a blurb for it, and he actually really liked it. I just was sitting in my house here. I just can't comprehend the fact that Bunny Carlos read my book. You know what I mean? It's not. I just can't put those things together.
It's funny picturing him reading the book too, wearing his suit and tie with just the cigarette just hanging out, the way he is at the Budokan.
Right. Yeah. I just can't. Even though I work with a band that's bigger than Cheap Trick is now, I can't. In my mind, I can't differentiate the two. You know what I mean? I still think of the bands I liked as when I was a kid as being those guys. You know.
No, I fully agree, and that's it. Just goes back to what we were discussing earlier about being indoctrinated into the mythology, and when you get to somehow reach out and all of that mythology, basically the rubber hits the road, and as you said, you're in the same building as them,
right?
Or you have some kind of real life interaction with these, as I said, these gods.
Yeah,
there's really nothing that beats it.
It's pretty. It's crazy if you don't expect it. I met Gene Simmons once. I was at the LA Forum at a Backstreet Boys show. I was working with Mandy Moore, and I walked around the corner, and there's Gene Simmons standing there, and I was like, "Holy shit!" I couldn't believe it. You know?
Yeah, Gene.
I've been fortunate that most of those people I've met have always been nice. You know, it seems like the older guys, they're cool, and really they're just older versions of us. You know, they're fans too. If Joe Elliott from Def Leppard was standing next to you and he got to meet Noddy Holder from Slade, he would be starstruck. You know, so it would. Yeah. It's all like a giant thing, and we're all a part of it in some weird way, which is pretty. It's still pretty amazing, I think.
That's the thing that makes it all the better, you know, just being part of the continuum. Indeed, you're all just handing down stories and songs, basically.
Right. It's all the same 12 chords. It's just been going on for 50 years.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Everyone's still doing it.
Exactly.
I'm just happy to be a tiny little part of it.
You and me both. Both. I was going to ask, when did obviously, so you were a kid, prime age, as you said, for the entire kind of like stadium rock of the late 70s. When did alternative music first kind of broach your sphere? When did you first become aware?
Well, I was playing in ANTiSEEN, and I knew of Nirvana and Tad and Mudhoney and Soundgarden. We opened for Soundgarden in 1991.
Wow.
So I remember, so I knew of those bands, and then Nirvana started to hit and really break out, and the singer of my old band was like, man, fuck Nirvana. And I was like, dude, it's a punk rock band that's bigger than Michael Jackson. We should be happy about this. I mean, it's not going to be the Ramones again. It's going to be somebody else. But, so of course, I mean, I was aware of all those bands probably in the later 80s. I'll tell you what the real epiphany was for me with alternative rock is I went to go see Ozzy Osbourne on like one of the terrible 80s period where he had the perm and he was wearing the glittery outfit like Shot in the Dark, the Ultimate Sin tour. And Metallica opened up for him, right? And it was Metallica on Ride the Lightning with the original bass player before he died.
Wow.
And these guys were four dudes with jeans on and T-shirts, and it was punk rock 100%. And I was like, I'd seen punk rock at punk rock bars that I went to and places my band played, but I had never seen punk rock in the arena. I'd never seen punk rock in a pedestrian way where why do these 2,000 people know about this? I thought there were only 50 people in my town that knew about it. And it shocked the shit out of me. And I remember seeing these people. I remember seeing Metallica playing. People are slam dancing in the floor of this arena. And I was just like, oh my God, this shit is getting ready to fucking blow up. And I remember watching Ozzy for a minute. And he comes down, he's got the perm, and it's ridiculous. And I left. And I drove to my singer's house that night. And I was like, dude, this shit is going to fucking happen. And that would have been probably 1986, I would guess. Maybe 85, 86, somewhere right in there.
That makes sense in the chronology, yeah.
Wherever the Ultimate Sin Ozzy record, whatever that tour was, but Metallica was opening. That was the moment when I saw that happen. I was like, holy shit, this whole thing, because I thought punk rock only existed in little punk rock bars. I'd never seen it so widely accepted, by an arena full of kids in Charlotte, North Carolina in the mid 80s. So I knew that made me realize it was all about to boil over.
That is awesome. I heard a similar story about Metallica at the I think it was one of the US festivals, the US festivals in the 80s, and basically the same story that I think it was, I can't remember the other headliners of the show or the other artists of the show, but again, a much more maybe established and kind of polished looking band, and Metallica, right. Same era, Ride the Lightning, ripped jeans and ripped t-shirt, go on and just slay. They just destroy and have almost a miniature Smells Like Teen Spirit moment.
Right, 100%.
But of metal, basically, which is a super cool thing. Rock and roll always benefits from these, stripping away all the shit and then and restarting the whole thing.
Right, but that's why the Ramones were so great, because they were just rock. Well, that's why AC/DC is so great, because here's AC/DC selling their whatever number album it is. And it was the biggest album in the whole world. AC/DC's the biggest band in the whole world, but they are rock and roll distilled down to its purest form, There's no bullshit. They have a few little gimmicks here and there for a show because they have to keep 70,000 people on their feet, but there's just nobody better than them. I mean, they're just 100% the real deal. I mean, he's got 10 Marshalls all cranked up. They're all really running. Those speakers on stage are all real. I have a friend that guitar tech for them, and I went backstage I went to the last AC/DC show they ever did in Philly with Axl singing. It was actually really good. And went back and played Malcolm's guitar and touched Angus's guitar. And they had 15 Marshalls that are all turned on. I mean, it's just no wonder they're all deaf.
Yeah, that's awesome. But
it's real. It's not pretend,
It's not pretend. It is the full experience with all of its danger.
Yeah. No, you go see. My buddy said if you stand on that stage while they're playing, it's like 130 decibels. Like it will rip your face off. Like it's like you standing behind an airliner when it takes off. It's that loud.
It will curdle your brain.
It will curdle your brain, and you'll never ever be able to have children after. It will sterilize you. I mean,
sterilize you with volume.
I saw them. I was with Sia at the Grammys about 4 or 5 years ago, and AC/DC opened the show. And when they do those, these TV shows, these big award shows, what they do is they start the show at noon and they run the whole show and do a real rehearsal all the way through to 3:00. Then everyone will go do the red carpet, blah, 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 blah. And then they do it again for real, right? So the rehearsal during the day, everyone has to go to it, no matter who you are. And AC/DC was opening. And it was at the Staples Center in LA. And it was so loud, and it's an empty arena, but they're just it's the real deal. There's dust and dirt falling down from the ceiling of the arena because all the dust that settled on the beams up 100 feet up in the arena is all coming down because they're shaking the entire building.
Wow.
I mean, it was so loud. It was hilarious that it was that loud, you know, and they're just up
Comically
there
loud.
doing what they do. So
Yeah. That is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
I still have not seen them.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, you have to. Well, they're supposed to do one more round of dates, so I would definitely, wherever you got to go, I would go do it because they're the real deal. I mean, they've been playing the same. I saw them the first time the night before I turned 18. Like I was going to be 18 in like 3 hours, right, in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And if I wrote down the set list when I saw them the night I turned 18 and the set list the last time I saw them, it's 90% the same set because they have so many great songs they have to play that their set list really hardly changes, you know. Maybe there's a couple, 2 or 3 new songs, but that's about it.
Yeah. And so did you see them would that have been like in first?
I saw them on first time on For Those About to Rock.
Okay. Yeah.
So I saw them. I didn't see them on Back in Black. I missed that. And I have friends who saw them with Bon Scott, but I never did.
Okay.
That was another thing where I was old enough, but I just screwed up and missed it.
It happens. It happens.
It does, yeah.
We just miss things.
Yeah.
Now here's a question. I gotta ask this because this is my favorite band of all time. I gotta ask. Did you ever see or come across the Replacements?
No, I love the Replacements, and I never saw them back in the day. They used to play in Charlotte around the time that I was playing in my band, but I made a very foolish decision back in those days, and that was I would never go see other bands like that because I thought it would mess me up. You know what I mean? I wanted to play and I wanted to be who I was playing and not be that guy. And I screwed up in the Replacements. It was a terrible mistake, but they probably played right down the street from my house and I didn't go. So I was a dumbass. It happens. Yes. So that's another one I missed.
And so when you were kind of just getting going with ANTiSEEN, what was the current climate like of alternative music? Did you say that Nirvana had not quite happened yet? Like this is the late 80s, early 90s? I stopped
playing in ANTiSEEN in 95. So certainly in 91, 92, we would go to Europe and we had the same agent in Europe. So there was an agency over there near Cologne and they had some backline. We probably all used the same backline, but, we would play places, in Europe, we would play places, we might have 100 people at one show. We might have 500 people at another show. We certainly did well there. We did well in parts of the US. Helmet opened for us once. We did, we played with Soundgarden. We opened for Red Cross once. We opened for Danzig once. We opened for the Ramones a couple times. So we got to do a lot of opening slots we were the biggest band from Charlotte at the time in that kind of music. So if a bigger band was coming, we would get the call. We're all but guaranteed the opening slot if they were using local support. So I thought it was a great time. And, it ran its course sort of. And I just started thinking that I wanted to, there was a weird thing that happened in around 92, 93, 94. And that was the labels grabbed all the bands that were alternative rock, that were the obvious ones. Like Nirvana gets big. Okay, I'm going to grab Soundgarden. I'm going to grab Pearl Jam. I'm going to grab this band. I'm going to grab that band. So all those bands got swiped up. They dumped all the hair metal bands that were in the pipeline. So now it was the second signing of alternative rock bands. This would have been around 92, 93. So the labels went out and they signed every band that was alternative rock, even if they had just started. Like the first band I tour managed was a band you never heard of called Lustre, Lustre. They'd played 5 or 6 shows and they got signed to A&M Records.
Wow.
Now Weezer got signed around that same time. And of course they're still kicking super hard, but a lot of these bands got signed. My friends in Watershed got signed to Epic Records. They only signed to Epic because Epic had Cheap Trick. And So all these bands got this second round of bands got signed very quickly, but they just threw them up against the wall. And if they stuck, they stuck. And if they didn't, they all got dropped.
No second chances. Yeah.
No second chances. So, the first band I worked with, Luster, they were dropped. I went out with them the summer of 96, and by fall they were dropped.
Wow.
So it was over. So I remember playing a show with Luster outside Toronto at a racetrack, kind of northeast of Toronto, and Mossport Park, I think it's called. We were doing this giant festival out there, and a year later, they were done, and those guys all had other jobs. It had gone, it went up and went down very quickly. So they, but of course, bands like Weezer and the Smashing Pumpkins and a few other bands got signed, and they still exist from that time period.
Yeah. So would you say that the entire kind of like gold rush climate of that early 90s thing really had a lot to do with the expediency with which it all petered out, this whole, this ravenous
I think
appetite?
they used to have artist development. Stop and think about what would happen if we took those rules and applied them to all the bands I grew up listening to. Kiss got big on their fourth album. Rush got big on their fourth album. Led Zeppelin didn't get big on their first album. Black Sabbath didn't get big. Styx, Foreigner, Journey, Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, these bands, they got big on, very few of those bands from the 70s got big on their first album. Most of the time it was 3 or 4 albums in. Cheap Trick got big on their fourth album.
Yeah.
So if you applied those rules of, hey, you're going to make one album and you're done, there would be no Queen, there would be no Led Zeppelin, there would be no Black Sabbath, there'd be no Kiss. All that stuff wouldn't exist, because back then they would give these bands a chance. There would be no rush, It's pretty. It sucks they didn't give these bands more of a chance to make more records, but they signed a whole shitload. They signed every band they could find back then.
Yeah. It just sounds like a crazy time. We worked with a producer named John Goodmanson, who's also part of the, I think he's worked with Train as well, but John's from Seattle, and he worked with a lot of, bands that were part of the grunge thing, and Sleater Kinney. And he talks about the app. He says the same thing that you said about that entire climate, that time in the early mid 90s of just like these massive inflated budgets, but also like it could be here today, gone tomorrow,
100%. And then of course, right in the middle of that, you had the whole, DVD or the ability to upload music on the internet. I remember doing a Train album once. The album came out, and we were in New York, and we went out to some giant dinner and spent God knows how much money on dinner, and thousands of dollars, and did all this stuff. And then a year and a half later, we had a new album out, and they're calling me bitching about how much money I'm spending for us to do Letterman, to do a TV show. I'm like, if they're bitching at me about bringing a band that has sold 5 million albums, how much money are they going to give your band? You know what I mean? Like they got, I remember someone from Sony Music telling me once, we're hurting in this floor, but 2 floors up, Sony Electronics is making every CD burner they can possibly make. And it's in the same fucking building.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
They're like, walk up the stairs, you guys are fucking us over.
Yeah.
But that was a weird time, you're right. And now it's evolved. Now we're on the other end of it. So now bands make albums, and thank God they still do, but you guys aren't going to make much money off the album. You're going to make money from promoting the album and going out on tour, when we can do that.
Yes, it's a very strange time, especially right now, February of 2021.
It's very strange. Yes. I got my W-2 that showed me how much money I made last year, and it reminded me of when I played in my punk rock band delivering pizzas because it was approximately the same amount of the one I got 30 years ago. So,
Oh my God.
I mean, trust me, yes, there's an entire industry of people are essentially dying on the vine right now because everyone's sitting at home and it's really bad. But hopefully all we can do is kind of hope. I mean, I don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? I don't know how to do anything else. So we just have to kind of get through it, and hopefully we'll be on the other end of it and we'll get to go do stuff again.
Well, I'm glad that, we can have this discussion and even just kind of shed some light on the entire situation right now that's facing your entire line of work, and which is immediately adjacent to my current line of work playing. But we couldn't do what we do without the assistance of everybody that makes touring and shows possible. It's the lifeblood of
everybody's sitting at home. I mean, I have a million rock star friends that are sitting at home right now. They're all waiting to know when they can go back out and do this again,
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because when you spend all of your time thinking about and developing skills in one vein, your ability to pivot into something else is not the greatest if you spent your entire life.
Well, that's the problem with this, is because if you are playing in a rock band, you're used to that life. I'm used to that life. I don't own this. This is as good as it gets. You know what I mean? I don't own a suit.
I'm not fucking learning how to code.
What am I going to do? I don't know. I mean, I was kind of hoping to work for like 6 or 7 more years, and maybe be done with all this stuff. And, I don't know. It's pretty hard to change careers at 57, I mean, it's hard to change careers at any time in your life. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to wait it out and see what, hopefully we'll go back to work this summer, I hope.
Well, there seems to be lots of promising, or at least there's some optimism on the horizon.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Right, it's like
everybody's still optimistic that this summer, especially later in the summer, is going to be kind of things will start opening up and start happening.
Yeah, and you guys have had a change in management at the top level of the federally. Things can change because of that, and there's lots of promising signs everywhere. I think it's a question of just trying to just stay as just on standby and stay positive as long as possible.
100%. Yeah, that's all you can
stay.
do.
Yeah. It's
a hiccup. It's a huge hiccup. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll all be talking about it. Oh, remember that? It sucked. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I hope that, the fear is that, some people are not going to come back, I wouldn't know who's going to unload our trucks next time we have an arena show? Where are all those stagehands that work at the Molson Amphitheater in Toronto? Where are they going to be? Where's those catering people at the amphitheater? Are they still working, or what are they, who's it going to be? I don't think anyone truly knows how this is going to pan out. So I think we're all just kind of waiting, and hopefully in the next few months, the situation will sort of evolve into a much better one.
I agree. And it's just the kind of thing that obviously this is a catastrophe overall, especially for our line of work, but it's also, it's not without its silver lining in that it just very much so demonstrates the imperative nature of people's jobs that are often overlooked in this.
100%. Well, also, a lot of people have gotten to stay home and do stuff. And I did a house renovation here at my house the last 6 months, and I'm happy I was home for that. We certainly could not have picked a worse line of work for this particular situation. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, if you walk out onto my street and walk up and down my street, everybody in my neighborhood's at work today except for me. You know, so I mean,
Yeah.
we definitely we nailed it in terms of picking
Yeah.
the worst possible job for
Yeah.
this mess. But
We
again,
went
hopefully
straight to
it'll be
hell.
over. We win the
No.
prize.
Exactly. I mean, I remember reading like when I feel like I can laugh about it a little bit now, but when they were first announcing what could not happen and why it couldn't happen, and they were talking about like the droplets, they're just like, so probably the worst thing ever is like a concert with someone singing. That's pretty much the
you're
perfect
just
storm
like,
for this whole thing. And I'm like, shit, that's literally my
Wait a
job.
minute.
Like, yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, and there are many photos of like the droplets of my, of me singing very hard on that microphone. I'm not
with
whispering.
kids this close to you.
Yeah,
right.
just in my face. I'm like, yeah.
Right.
Well, this Super Spreaders would be a good band name, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure somebody's grabbed it already.
Oh God, yeah.
It's too early for that joke, though. But soon, someday, like they're getting their act together now.
Someday. It'll be like the Dead Kennedys. It's just like, a little bit later on. So I wanted to ask you a couple band-specific questions.
Okay.
Rockstar Supernova. Now, this was a
that's
show.
A good one, yeah.
This was a show that me and my friends watched when we were in high school and were fascinated by it. For anyone that's unfamiliar, Rockstar Supernova was basically a reality show where members of and I think I can remember some of them off the top of my head. I remember Jason Newsted was freshly out of Metallica, right?
Right.
He was on bass.
Yep.
Who was on guitar? Oh, Gilby Clarke, right?
Gilby Clarke, yeah,
Guns N'
100%.
Roses, yeah. Who was on drums? I can't remember who was on
Tommy
drums.
Lee.
Tommy Lee from,
Yes.
damn, how can I forget? Tommy Lee's on drums.
So, yes, it's Tommy Lee, Gilby, the guy from Metallica, and it's basically... It was sort of an American Idol-esque sort of show, except they reversed it. It's this pretend band of three dudes who were Tommy Lee, Motley Crue on drums, Gilby Clarke from Guns N' Roses on guitar, and Jason Newsted on bass. And they're this pretend band that's looking for a singer. So so what they did was they had this whole TV show, and it went on and on. Excuse me, and it was very popular, did really well. And then at the end, the kid singer, who was this guy named Lucas Rossi from Toronto, actually, he becomes the singer. So they go, it's the grand ending of the show, and Lucas is the singer, and here's our tour dates. So we're going out on tour in 6 months. So here are all the dates. So boom, boom, boom. Everyone's sitting at home and they're watching TV and they're like, oh shit, I'm going to go see Rockstar Supernova in Chicago, blah, 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 blah. So they buy some tickets. Well, then the band goes in the studio to make an album, right? And they make this album, and Butch Walker, my friend Butch Walker, produces it. It's really a great album. There's really great songs on it. Then they put the album out. Well, why do you go to rock concerts? To hear a band play songs that you know, right?
Yeah.
Why would you go to a rock concert of a band that you've never heard their album? You see what I mean? They got the cart before the horse, sort of. So the album comes out. Nobody takes it seriously because it's a fucking reality TV show band.
Yeah.
Right? The only place it gets played is in Toronto and Detroit because Lucas is Canadian, and the Canadian radio stations are always looking for Canadian artists, right?
Yeah.
Because of the rules they have. So we go out on the tour. Nobody knows any of the songs. Like, imagine if you went to a rock concert and you had no idea any of the songs. Like, that's what was happening. And it was terrible because actually the album was good, but more people bought the tickets than bought the album. People were buying the tickets because they knew the band from the TV show. So when it came time, so the band goes in the studio, makes the album. In the process, they decide they part ways with Jason Newsted. And when it comes time for the band to tour, they get my buddy Johnny Colt, who was the original bass player of the Black Crowes. He was in Train with me. So they get Johnny Colt to be the bass player. So Johnny's like, hey, man, you should come out with me and do this tour. I was sitting home doing nothing. So I was like, sure. So we had 100 So we did like 25 shows, and the shows had no walk up. You know what walk up is for you kids at home is, you know, if your band sells 200 tickets for your show next week, the walk up is how many people buy tickets the day of the show that say, hey, it's nice outside, I'm going to go see your band. We had no walk up because they were afraid that the people that had bought tickets weren't even going to come because they had bought the tickets like a year ago. And they bought the tickets because it was a reality TV show band. They weren't buying the tickets because you want to go see a band you like, right? So it was super fucked up. But we did the tour, and I get to hang out with Tommy Lee every day, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 100% exactly the dude that you think he is. You know what I mean? And he is just a 12-year-old trapped in a dude's body. You know what I mean? He's like, bro, he's that guy. 100%.
Spinning the sticks. Yeah.
Yeah, he would do all that. I would actually play bass at soundcheck with him, and me and him would like jam out, which was pretty fun.
That's pretty sick.
He would always have he was dating back then, so he'd always have this assortment of girls that would come out. One would come, she'd stay for a day or two, then the other couple would come, they'd stay for a day or two, and another one would come. He'd always take one day off, and then he would cycle them back through. So he had a stereo that he carried with him that was two giant, like imagine if you went into Lee's Palace in Toronto and took the PA, that's his stereo. Like it's like a 400-seat club PA, right? It's two giant speakers and a big rack of power amps in his MacBook Pro. So about 20 minutes after the show, you'd walk down the hallway of the arena and you just hear, it's so loud. It sounds like some club in Miami. You'd open the door, and he's standing on top of a table with no shirt on, with a cigarette in one hand and a vodka cranberry in the other. And there's 50 girls in there dancing around. He's like, hey, bro, come on in. Woo! So you'd go in. And then the next night, same exact situation 24 hours later, but different arena, different town. You'd walk down the hallway. You'd hear, you know, you'd go in the door, and he's standing on top of the table with the cigarette and the vodka cranberry, and there's nobody in there except for him. He's like, hey, bro, come on in. So it was just constant. He's the real deal, you know. Remember how excited you were when you were like 17 years old and your band was going to play a show somewhere and you were looking forward to it all day long and like, man, we're going to kill it tonight, you know, that kind of thing. He's that way even today.
Wow.
He's not jaded at all. He's like, let's go, God damn it. You know, he's like ready to do it. So
he's Tommy Lee, rain or shine.
He's ready. He's ready to go. He's as excited. Now keep in mind that guy, I mean, he dropped out of high school 6 weeks before he was supposed to graduate because Motley Crue had to go out on tour. He was a little bit younger than those other guys were. So I don't think he ever really had a job. I mean, I think he went right from high school to being in Motley Crue in the 80s. So
wow.
It was pretty full blast. He was pretty entertaining.
It's great to hear that Tommy Lee is exactly how you think Tommy Lee's
He is precisely that dude. There's no anything else. Like he's like an open book. It's like what you think it is what it is.
Now I have to ask, and it's totally understandable if this is off limits information, but was there a reason stipulated by Mr. Jason Newsted for leaving the camp, or was it similar?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. If I knew the answer, I would tell you, but I think they just didn't get along. Maybe that's kind of the vibe I got. He made he was on the TV show and he was on the album with them, but I think something may have happened during the making of the album. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I never met him because by the time I was in on it, Johnny was playing bass for him.
That just sounds like just such a surreal situation there when you have basically this like you have big venues worth of tickets that are being sold, yet nobody's
Right.
familiar with any of the music, because at the time the tickets were purchased, there was no music per
Right.
se.
Right.
And so
It's
you
all
have this
completely
anxiety.
backwards.
Yeah, it's all backwards. It's all super strange, and there's a lot of fear about how the whole thing's going to land. So, what were those shows like, where you have venues full of people coming to see a band who they don't know one single song by,
It was
or
what you
only?
think. I mean, it was just, they were just like, what's this? At first they played cover. They didn't know what to do. At first, the first 2 or 3 Rockstar Supernova shows were almost like Motley Crue. Like Tommy Lee was doing a couple of his Motley Crue tricks. He would go out to the front of the stage and drink a bottle of Jägermeister and hand it to the kids in the audience and do stuff like that. And there were a lot of old ladies that were sitting in the audience that just, that watch the TV show. And TV, the thing about it is this: if you're on the radio's this big. If you're on TV, it's like this big.
Yeah.
People know. If your TV is such a much larger monster than the radio is, and these people just didn't know any of the songs, so the shows were flat. And then eventually the band started like playing some covers that they had played throughout the season of the TV show. And then that ended up, being like a big help. So towards the end, and the opening bands on that tour were all the bands from the TV show. Like, what's his name from Jane's Addiction, the guitar player,
Dave Navarro?
His band was on there.
Okay.
And a couple of the other bands that were on the TV show, people that were on the TV show, were the opening bands. So the whole tour was essentially the whole group of like the finalists from the TV show, sort of.
Did the whole thing have? I mean, it just seems to me, by everything that you've said about it, it just seems to have a very strange, uncomfortable reality TV show feel when it tried to actually translate from a show to real life, and didn't quite, I guess, land as they may have attempted to do so when they outlined the whole, here's how we're going to translate this from a show into real life. It just seems like
it's just, I mean, if anyone gets in their car tomorrow, if your band is playing Lee's Palace, God forbid, one of my least favorite venues on the planet. Let's pretend your band is playing Lee's Palace tomorrow night, and 75 or 100, 200 kids get in their car and they drive to Toronto, or they drive the subway, or they do whatever to go see you play. They're going because they want to hear the songs that your band plays, right? If the Rolling Stones are playing, the Air Canada Centre, those 45,000 people want to hear the Rolling Stones play the Rolling Stones' greatest hits. This was a weird situation because you never buy concert tickets for a band that you have no idea what the songs are, because the record, you bought the tickets 6 months before you bought the record. Usually it's the other way around. Usually I would buy your record and I would listen to it, like it, then I would go see you play. So it was just fundamentally flawed overall idea from basically the onset. But I think the TV show was the most important component, and the live show was just like the bonus part of it. You know what I mean? So I think it was a successful TV show, and that's where they all made their money.
So what, and I guess it goes without saying that at the conclusion of this tour, there wasn't much else booked for.
No.
For
Well,
rock.
actually, they went to Australia and New Zealand with this, which of course, now sometimes you go to Australia. I don't remember how many shows they had. You have to remember, if you go to Australia, there are times you go to Australia and you play 3 shows.
Yeah.
You play Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe you might go and play
Perth.
Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and that's it. And maybe you go to Auckland. So there aren't that many. I think they went and played like 3 or 4 Australian shows and maybe 1 in New Zealand. But then that was the end of it.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, though, because at that point I was out. Train was busy again, so I had to go do that.
And so that brings me into my next question. I had a couple questions about the whole Train thing because John Goodmanson, our mutual, or I guess another fella from this universe, has kind of instilled me with a fascination with that band. So what's it like having or I guess tour managing a band that has a song that's as big as that Drops of Jupiter song? Like, what is it like in the arena reliably when they play that song? Or it was
Well, I mean, it's, you know what it is it's like pouring gas on the fire. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I started with Train on their first album tour. I did the first tour with them where they were playing. We played Lee's Palace on the first tour that I did with them. That was our Toronto show. So we were playing small 300, 400, 500 seat places. Maybe in a couple cities they were having, 500 people show up, 600 people, whatever. But I remember hearing Drops of Jupiter as a demo tape in the van one day, and I was like, holy shit, I could hear it playing in my brain like 6 hours later. And then we had a tour booked for when that album came out, and the song exploded, and then the tour sells out immediately. So now we have to go do all those shows, even though they're all sold out. So it really, I mean, when it's working, it's awesome. There's nothing hits. I have a friend that says hits fix everything, and if you have a hit, it solves every problem you might have. I mean, it blows up, everything gets big, there's next thing you know, instead of 10 people standing out behind the bus at night, there's 50 people standing out behind the bus or 100 standing out behind the bus if you're playing clubs. And it's a great big party and everybody's thrilled and everyone's happy. And then about a year later, of course, as you know, the money starts to roll in. But, with Train, I was with them long enough where the first 3 albums were hits and did really well. Their 4th album didn't do as well. The singer made a solo record, which really didn't do well. And then Hey Soul Sister became a hit and it blew completely up and we were back all in arenas all over the world again. So it went up and went down and went up again. So
I was just going to say, it seems to be one of those rare instances though, where that previous momentum or that previous height was revisited after a dip, like a marked dip. That Soul Sister song,
it went way bigger the second time.
Yeah,
I think there's a different amount of, like, for example, who is the most loyal music listener? The dude who listens to hard rock. You know what I mean? The dude who says, "Fuck yeah, I'm going to see Metallica." That guy, right? You've never heard a dude say, "Fuck yeah, I'm going to see John Mayer tonight." You know what I mean? Or, "Fuck yeah, I can't wait to go see the Counting Crows," or Matchbox 20. It's going to be awesome. You know what I mean? I hate to say that because I know the Matchbox 20 guys and they're all nice guys, but no dude has ever said, "Fuck yeah, I can't wait to see Matchbox 20. It's going to rule."
No.
That dude goes because his girlfriend likes them. You know what I mean? And she's going, so he's going. If your girlfriend goes to see Matchbox 20, you'll go with her. If you're going to see Judas Priest, she'll stay home and go out with her friends. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So my point is that hard rock is the kind of music that has the most loyal diehard fans, and AAA, Hot AC, bands like Train and Matchbox 20 and Counting Crows and Hootie and the Blowfish and all those kinds of bands that are Hot AC sort of bands, their fan base is kind of comes and goes, So if you have a hit on the radio, they do really well, but if they don't have a hit, it kind of tends to drop off a little bit, And so I think that is just a product of that type of music, if that makes sense. Whereas hard rock and punk rock and hard rock and heavy metal and groups like that tend to have that dude is going to see Metallica regardless of what their new album sounds like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the girl in the cube listening to Mix 107 isn't going to go see John Mayer next time around unless she hears a new song on the radio and knows to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Comes with the territory.
it's a different level of overall music loyalty. Now, I'm not suggesting those bands don't have large diehard fan bases, because they do, but the bigger amount of people are very kind of come and go sort of people, if that makes sense.
Yes. No, totally makes sense. So out of the other kind of artists that you've worked with, and the last thing I kind of wanted to end off on, and I really appreciate all of your time here, Tom.
Oh, yeah, happy to do it.
I love these anecdotes, and especially the GG Allin stuff was great. So I just wanted to ask if there's any kind of highlights as a veteran tour manager of the highest caliber, as you are. What you don't have to mention any names, but any good stories come to mind. And again, I appreciate that's a bit of a vague question. I get asked it sometimes, and I kind of blank up. But is there anything that comes to mind that you can share with well,
I mean, I think that when it's working, it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, I remember, I told this story recently. I remember being with Train at a baseball game. At the Pittsburgh Pirates were playing a baseball game, and Train was playing in the field after the game. And the Pittsburgh loses. There's like 35,000 people at this baseball stadium. They roll the stage out. Everybody stays, and because Train's playing this like after the baseball game sort of concert. And it's time for us to go on, and we're way over like in the third base dugout area. And it's time for us to walk across the field to go to the stage. So the band, most of the band and a couple of the crew guys are walking ahead of us. Me and the singer are kind of way behind. So they're shining these big spotlights on the group in front of us. Me and Pat are kind of walking. They don't realize it's him, you know. So we're walking, and the crowd's cheering, and there's cameras going off, and the guy's like, "Ladies and gentlemen," you know, doing all that, building it up. You know, and we had just spent, you know, Train's career had gone down, and then Hey Soul Sister happened, and it exploded, and we busted our asses. I mean, we were gone from in 2010, from March to Christmas. Me and the three of those guys were never home for a week. You know, 10 months straight, because we'd go to Europe, go to Australia, come back, go to South America, go to Europe again, go to Japan again. We were just endlessly going, and we killed ourselves. And we really worked harder than anyone does to try to rebuild their career. So we're walking across this incident happened in like August of 2011. And Pat looked around, and he just looked up, and he saw all these people and all this stuff. And he just looked at me and goes, "Dude, how did this happen?" And he would never normally ask me a question like that. And I thought about it for a second. I said, "Dude, it's because we fucking busted our asses, and we did everything we were supposed to do. We did everything we needed to do, and we just worked and ground it out and earned it all back." And you know, so when stuff like that happens, when you're busting your ass to try to do something and you achieve it, that's pretty awesome, you know. I mean, obviously you'll have moments in life, getting married or having a kid or whatever, those kind of things. Sure, those are bigger events in your life, but events in your career, you know, are things like that. And that's why, like I said at the beginning of this, that's why we do this stuff. I don't give a shit if I sold one book. Bunny Carlos liked my book. I don't give a fuck how many books I sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I already did more than I ever imagined I would do. So, I mean, I think that's the important part about it, because at heart, we're all still those kids that believe. You know what I mean? We believe. So yes. I'm that kid too, even though I've been that kid 3 times over now probably, but it's just, that's what it is. And that's, I want to believe. I want this to be, you know what I mean? I want to go see my favorite bands and do all that stuff. That's why I do this. So when it works and you bust your ass and it pays off, and I don't mean that just financially, I just mean doing some stuff like that. Those are the magic moments that make it worthwhile. Because of course, as you know, for every awesome story like that, you also have we were stuck on the side of the road for 4 hours with a flat tire and nobody would stop and help us, you know, and all that crap that you have to put up with. So
AC/DC said it the best. It's a long way to the
It's
top.
a long way
rock
to
and
the
roll.
top. That's the truth.
I mean, who doesn't love that? I mean, the arc of a band like Train is like one of the it's the classic redemption story, and that
100%.
Personal anecdote from it is very meaningful to me because it's I don't know, it's amazing. It's an amazing thing to reach those kinds of heights, only to kind of, as you said, lose them and then earn it all back one bit at a time.
Back, but you had
like
to
a decade later.
And those guys, that's the thing about those bands that is such a misnomer or thing people don't like. If I said to you, who do you think is the hardest working band in the world, or who do you think is the hardest working band in rock and roll, you would guess 100 bands before you would guess them. But really, they are. I mean, and the one thing is, their singer can sing every single day. Like we did one time we did, I'm not exaggerating. You're not even going to believe this, but we did 17 shows in 15 days in 6 time zones. Now, I'm not talking about 3-song acoustic things at a radio station. I'm talking about full on headlining 75, 90-minute sets. 17 shows, 15 days, 6 time zones, 1/4 of the earth. And you know what? On the 17th show, he was better than he was on the first show.
That is
because he's like Robin Zander. He can sing like his worst day is anyone else's dream day in terms of being a singer. He's one of the most powerful singers in modern rock music today. But you wouldn't think that because they're, people think, oh, Train, that's my wife's favorite band.
Yeah.
But they're really not. I mean, he's like Robert Plant or Steven Tyler or Robin Zander. And I throw those compliments out understanding what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I wouldn't call any singer Robin Zander,
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, he can really, really sing. It's pretty amazing. So because of that, if we had 5 shows in a row and 5 shows in a row, we need to do another one and make it 11 in a row. He was like, yeah, dude, let's do it.
Let's do it.
So we busted our asses for 2 years to bring that whole thing back. So that's what happened. So when it works, it's very good to see that happen.
It's magic when you get to have those moments.
It's magic, right? When it really works and it's really kicking and it's really going, it's pretty magical, I always wanted as a kid, I always thought the one thing I always wanted was I wanted to work for a band I loved from when I was a kid. Because if I could end my career working with someone I loved from when I was a kid, then I would kind of see the whole thing come back to where it started, sort of. And I do love Weezer, and I rode around in my car listening to the Blue record in 1994, 26 years ago. And that's probably as close as I'll get. I don't think Cheap Trick's going to call me or Kiss is going to call me, but and all the bands I like are going to be done, so in a year or so. So I'm happy to ride it out with those guys because we all get along really well. I like those guys a lot, and they're a great band, and they play all my favorite songs every night. So it's a good thing.
Well, speaking of the kind of feeling that you illustrated earlier about the first time you get to be in the room as your heroes, and
right?
It's, that just kind of. That physical fact is so overwhelmingly amazing. I had the same feeling the first time that I saw Weezer when they were I think it was my 14th or 15th birthday, but they played with the Pixies, and same kind of feeling of like, oh my God, that's Patrick, right? It's like
and we just did a giant tour in 2018, 17, and 18. We did like 50 shows with the Pixies.
Yeah, again, they're
so pretty
awesome.
Amazing. They have no set list, and Charles, their singer, has a giant piece of paper about this big, and it has about 50 one-word song titles on it. And when he walks out there, I mean, he knows he's going to play "Where's My Mind," and there's probably like 6 other songs that they're going to play.
Yeah.
But there's no set list. So he walks out there and he looks at that piece of paper and he just starts playing whatever the first song is. And the other 3 have no idea what the next song is going to be.
That is
So,
insane.
now he might. I've seen them play Where Is My Mind first. I've seen him play it in the middle of the set, and I've seen him play it last. But the set was different every single night. It was pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're cool. We got to hang out with them a lot. They're a good bunch.
Yeah, I got to spend a little bit of time with Joey one night. They played here in Hamilton, and they went to a local bar afterwards, and it was privileged information which bar they were going to, and I got a text the Pixies are coming.
Right, you got
oh my god!
Yeah, they told the leak, the security leak.
I'll never forget too. I was about 20 years old when this happened, and we're all huge Pixies fans. And one of my friends went up to Charles and asked for an autograph, and kind of cornered. And I totally understand. The guy's like he's just trying to unwind and talk to some people. And and Charles did one of the funniest things I've ever seen. He was given a pen, so he was holding a pen, and he didn't. He was asked to autograph this ticket, and he didn't even look. He just kind of dragged his hand across the thing and dropped the pen and said, "Have a good night."
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's a very very Pixies move. But
yeah, they're really great. They were really great every single night.
Yeah, great band. They also played a secret show at the Casbah, which is a 100-person venue just down the street.
Oh
here.
wow!
But, Hamilton's got pretty good little Pixies history.
Now, is Hamilton near where Neil Peart was from?
Yes, it is. I can't remember exactly where he's from, but it is right in here. Yeah,
it's in that area, right?
Yeah,
I heard they were going to do some memorial or something for him.
I think so. There's a bunch of stuff in the works. There's
that
also
as they should.
As they should. The professor, as they call him.
The professor, yeah.
Anyways, that's the end of my questions, Thomas. But I had such a good time talking to you.
Me too. I always love to talk about rock and roll.
Rock and roll's all there is, man. It's all there is.
Yep, that's my favorite. So hopefully we'll be back out this year. Hopefully we'll do some. We're playing in Toronto this summer at the. I think it's where we're supposed to do some dates. We have a show that we're doing a tour this summer called Hell Omega. It's Green Day, Fall Out Boy, and Weezer, and we're supposed to play in Toronto. I suspect at the place where the Blue Jays play sometime in August. So hopefully we'll get to do it.
Well, that would be fantastic. If you guys are here, I will be there, and we'll have to meet up.
All right. Well, definitely so. Yep, that'll be cool. Yeah, but hopefully, I just hope that hopefully we go back to work. That's what we all want to do. So that's what we need to do.
Well, here's hoping that's sooner than later. And I just wanted to say quickly that again, you've got a fantastic book out called "Waiting to Derail." And is there anything else that you'd like to plug for the listeners?
No, that's it. This book came out in June of 2018. Of course, some shenanigan news came out about Ryan in February of 2019. This book only covers a very, very short period of time. It's very precise. This book starts the day that I get the phone call to tour manage Whiskeytown in April or May of 97, and it ends in October of 2000. So the book only covers that period of time, that like 2.5 year period, almost 3 year period of time. And so it has nothing to do with any of the current business with him. But I mean, to be honest with you, I just think it's a good, I wrote it because I feel like it's an important story, and I sort of, in the spirit of what way we've been talking, I sort of owe it to rock and roll, because think about this. I'm the person who saw this. You know what I mean? There is no human being on the planet Earth that saw this band more than I did. And I remember it all. My memory is pretty flawless. And, you know, if something happens to me, that story's gone. You know what I mean? So that's kind of why I wrote that. I thought it's because I do think Ryan Adams is an important artist, and it was definitely a weird period of time witnessing sort of there's a genius, a kid genius at work. You know what I mean? This guy could pull songs out of thin air. Now as most geniuses are, most people are very level like this, okay? If you're a little good at something, you're probably a little bad at something. Ryan was like this, you know? Ryan would come home to my house because he lived with me when we weren't on tour. He would come home and he'd reach in his pocket, pull out a napkin, lay it on the table, pick up an acoustic guitar, and just play you the most magical, unbelievable song you ever heard, right? And I would go, God damn, dude, where did that song come from? He goes, oh, I wrote it like a half hour ago at the bar. And I was like, well, what guitar did you play? He's like, I sang the song in this side of my head while I played the guitar in this side of my head. I mean, he could just sit there and shit out one song after another after another.
Wow.
Like, I've never seen anyone like a pure. He could be a lot of things, and I know a lot of people aren't into him anymore because of his shenanigans, but he is the purest, most ridiculous musical genius I ever met in my whole life. Like, he could just, you could name anything. Like, I told him once, I said, let's write a song like the Foo Fighters. And he went, what's the title? And I gave him a title. He put his finger to his head. He went, I got it. He played the whole song. It was better than Monkey Wrench. He wrote it in 30 seconds and just shit it out and then lost it. So he could just, I always said he had longer antennas than anyone else because he would just pick these songs up that were like floating in the air and here they are. Like one time he went and made, in fact, I have it right here, I think. Let me see where it is. Hold on one second. Here's a whole Whiskeytown album that he went in the studio and recorded this album. This is one of 10 in the world. And it's got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 songs on it. He just wrote this for the hell of it, mailed it to the record company as a joke one day. Went, oh, here's another album. Wow. And just wrote he wrote, recorded, and put all those songs out in 3 days.
That is insane.
And just said, here's another album, just for the fun of it, completely, really for the hell of it, you know? And it was just, now granted, you know, we stepped off the bus one morning in Aspen, Colorado, and he looked up in the sky and said, what the fuck are we doing at a ski resort? And I was like, dude, Aspen, Colorado is a ski town. You didn't know that? I mean, who doesn't know that? So, you know, there were times where his geography skills were pretty horrendous and his understanding of subjects that he's not interested in is pretty terrible, but he'd pick a banjo up and go, blah, 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 blah. When did you pick up a banjo? I don't have one. I just play one every once in a while if I see one. Wow. And he's shredding on it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just, he's really just an insane musical genius. And so witnessing, that's really what the book is about. The book is about this kid who is a genius and the first handful of people, myself included, who realized it. Who realized
that and are basically...
Because I knew that wasn't normal. I knew that when he was writing whole albums, you know, every single day writing 2 or 3 songs and putting whole albums together in a week, that's not really normal.
Yeah,
a lot of bands struggle and toil and spend time and work hard to make records. And the ease in which the songs just, oh, here's another song, here's another song, here's another song. It's almost like voodoo or something. You know what I mean? It's just hard to describe. So that's what the book is about.
That sounds awesome. I mean, that just sounds like an interesting firsthand account of a pretty unparalleled talent and atypical.
Yeah. It's definitely a astounding. Like you just couldn't believe how talented he was. But at the same sense, you know, the other part of it that's so odd is, you know, he's a punk rock dude. He has a Black Flag tattoo, you know. So here's all these guys playing, listening to Wilco and Sunvolt and all these alternative country bands, and then they go see Whiskeytown and Ryan's smashing guitars and ruining the show. And I understand why he's doing it, because it's punk rock, you know what I mean? But these people that are like Wilco fans are like, why did he destroy those guitars? I don't understand, and it's because his band was a punk rock band that was playing alternative country music. It wasn't an alternative country band at all. It was a punk rock band. So you might go see them one night and it might be amazing. Like you couldn't believe how good it was. You might go see them the next night. It might be terrible, like terrible, terrible. You might go see him the next night and he smashes a guitar and walks off 10 minutes into the show, and I can't collect the money because we didn't play very long.
Yeah.
So it was always, and you never knew which it was going to be. So it was very much like the Replacements. You might go see the Replacements back in the day. One night you might see them and they were amazing. The next night you might see them and they were in the audience and the crew was up on stage playing Kiss songs and they're in the audience drunk.
Yeah.
And would never play.
Yeah.
And would make their crew band go up on stage. So they were very similar to I certainly believe to some extent that Westerberg and the Replacements were certainly a model for him,
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you listen to Avenues off Stranger's Almanac, which is the Whiskeytown album that we were touring, if you listen to the song Avenues off that album and then go listen to Skyway by the Replacements.
Yeah. A couple similarities. Some borrowing.
Some similarities for sure.
I just remembered the name of the Replacements roadie band that would play when the Replacements were in the crowd, and their roadies would play. The band was called Jefferson's Cock.
Did you ever read the Bill Sullivan book by the?
No, I really want to. Lemon Jail.
Yeah, he's a good dude. I know him from those days because he had a Raleigh connection. His brother. Bill Sullivan's brother owned a pretty, like Raleigh is where the college in Raleigh is NC State. That's right in downtown Raleigh. And Bill Sullivan's brother owned the coffee place that had been there for like 30 or 40 years. And Bill Sullivan lived in Minneapolis and ran a bar called the 400 Bar that holds 400 people. It's in downtown, right near the Prince place. I can't remember the name of that place.
First Avenue?
Yeah, 7th Avenue. First entry. Yeah, First Avenue, 7th Street or whatever.
Street,
so it was somewhere right near there. But yeah, that book is really good. You should read that. He was me with those guys.
Yes.
Like he was in the RV when they destroyed the RV.
Yes.
When they played Toronto, and then the Replacements would always carry paint with them. So back in those days, these bands would tour and you'd go in the dressing room and you'd go, "Hey man, can't wait to see you guys again someday, blah, blah, blah." And then your band would show up a week later and you'd read it, right? Well, the Replacements would carry white buckets of paint with them and they would paint over all that shit just to be assholes.
Oh my God.
So apparently there's a famous story where they were drunk and fucked up and they were leaving Toronto and they actually drove right past your house on their way to Buffalo. And they got into the paint in the RV and they started cracking open these gallon jugs of paint and throwing it all over each other. And then the American Customs guys were like trying to search the van and the van was torn out. I think they took the toilet ripped the toilet out of the floor of the RV and threw it out onto the QEW.
Oh my God.
Like between Toronto and Buffalo. So it's in that book.
That's my favorite band of all time.
Yeah, they did all that stuff for sure.
It sounds like it might have been fun at times, but
it's one of those things that was probably not fun while you were doing it, but then years later, it makes for a good like campfire story. I would say the same thing. I mean, I wasn't thrilled when, Ryan Adams was kicking the monitors off the stage of the Fillmore and I was not getting paid that night. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then,
When you're living it. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're living it, you're like, oh, come on, dude.
Yeah.
So much like anything else, you kind of tend to glamorize the
struggle.
The struggle, and you remember the good parts and you mentally block out the bad parts. parts.
Yeah.
Saves
And
you some
thank
money on
God.
therapy.
Thank God for
yeah,
that.
Thank
Yeah.
God. Thank God you don't remember everything.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, Thomas, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're
and
very welcome. I'm
I had
happy
such
to do it.
such a great time talking to you about, and relating to you about just being two kids in rock and roll, and that's really what it's all about. And trying
what it's all
trying
about.
trying to rub shoulders with your heroes while you can, and just enjoying
right.
this thing that thank God exists, rock and roll.
That's
so,
right. Amen.
So we're hoping we all get back on the road real soon. But until then, take care, and again, everybody check out Thomas's book, Waiting to Derail. Again, thanks for being on the podcast.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks again.
All right.